Amelia. Hello, everyone. My name is Detrice Fox, and like Amelia said, I am from the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library. I am an adult services librarian there, and I've been there for 16 years. I just want to go ahead and jump right into the workshop. This is communicating your value. This is all about talking about yourself, talking up yourself. Yeah, kind of bragging on yourself. And when it comes to career advancement, we cannot be modest. We have to kind of get out there and get to doing things that make us uncomfortable. And bragging on ourselves makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. So today's discussion is going to focus primarily on three things. The first is going to be self-assessment. Basically, who am I? A lot of people don't know how to describe themselves um, as professionals and as people who can provide value. And so it's important that we're able to describe who we are and what we do. We'll also identify the contributions that we've made in specific settings, whether it's contributions to an organization or a specific project or things like that. So we'll identify those. So what have I done? What value have I added? We'll look at those things. And then we'll look at bragging on yourself. And this is all about communicating your value, talking about yourself to a point where it could lead to future opportunity. So my goal is to get you comfortable with communicating what you bring to the table. So with that being said, I have a question. And if you could post in the chat, what are you comfortable with talking about yourself or communicating your value? Just a yes or no, throwing it in the chat. I just want to get an idea of where you guys stand with that. I got a lot of no's, a yes, a kinda, ish. Sometimes not with everyone. That's important to know your audience. Sometimes depending on your audience. Yes. Thank you for you know, contributing to that discussion in the chat. Thank you. So, sheesh. So who is Detrice? Let me kind of brag on myself a little bit. I am, and these are just all I would say are my superpowers. I am an authentic motivator, inspiring coach, consistent executor, a thorough connector, and one of the things that all librarians usually are lifelong learners. So I thrive on engaging and maximizing my skills as a librarian and to empower individuals to career confidence. I use all the resources at my fingertips to inspire that for people. Also entrepreneurial success through one-on-one coaching, networking, and support. So some of the things that I do for the library right now is I conduct, career coaching. I inspire community connections through hosting a career talk over coffee twice a month. And I also offer career support and encouragement by co-hosting a job support group every week at 4:00, every Monday at 4:00. So not only have I done those things for the library, I've also extended that knowledge to empower entrepreneurs, small businesses, and nonprofits. My specialty is coaching. I love it. If you ask me what I could do for free, get up every day and do for free every single day, it would be coaching. And coaching people to articulate, be able to speak to the ideas that they have in infancy and working to launch them. So that brings me so much joy. I'm most fervent about helping people execute their ideas, witnessing their growth through their career success and entrepreneurial endeavors, and igniting the discovery and exploration of their purpose. People get to this point in life where it's just like, what is my purpose? What is my why? I love helping people to explore those things and discover and explore. So that's who Detrice is. Which leads me to, like, I know who I am professionally as far as what brings me joy, what I'm most passionate about. In the chat, if you could type in the chat, what are you known for professionally? What brings you joy? What do your colleagues say about you? What's the thing that you are known for? Anybody in the chat? Efficient and thorough, yes. Customer service and collaboration. Meticulous, thorough, process-oriented, making connections with people, making others feel welcome. Creative problem solving is the thing. Absolutely. Thank you for that, for your answers to that. So as we thought about a little bit about like what we're known for and what makes us who we are as professionals, we have to think about the concepts around communicating value. And these are two concepts that are based in personal branding. And a part of your personal brand is being able to communicate your value. And so communicating your value is based around one of this first concept, self-presentation and self-promotion. That's the communication part. Consistently and continually reinforces the essence of what makes you stand out on a day-to-day basis. And another concept is exploring your personal brand is an opportunity to learn more about yourself and identify your unique skills, strengths, and talents. So again, talking about yourself is all about self-promotion. When it comes to your next level or what you want to do next, or gaining or getting opportunities, it's going to be important that you are not humble at this time and that you begin to brag on yourself. We have to be able to know ourselves. So we'll have to do some self-assessment, be able to identify those contributions and brag about it. And it's not bragging if you are able to support what you're saying. You have to be able to back up what you're saying with facts. So that's going to be important in communicating your value. So let's assess. First, there's a book called Brag Better by Meredith Feynman, and I live by this book. I love this book. I've learned so much from it in the past year. I think it came out in 2020. So she identifies people as a qualified quiet. And so this is how she describes the qualified quiet. You might be qualified quiet if you have trouble talking about your accomplishments. You might be qualified quiet if talking about yourself feels when you hear someone talk about themselves or self-promote, it feels distasteful to you. You might be qualified quiet if you want to run and hide at the thought of giving a speech or talking about yourself. You might be qualified quiet if you can chat all day about your friends and how great they are, but when it comes to yourself, you're silent. You might be qualified quiet if you expect your work to speak for itself. And lastly, you might be qualified quiet if you won't seek well-deserved credit. So it's important that we kind of get out of this qualified quiet realm and begin to talk about ourselves in a manner that can move us to the next level in our career or to the next opportunity. So it's okay to be qualified quiet. We know that being qualified quiet is good for some of us, but for most of us, we have to be able to speak to the value that we've added. So that second to last bullet where it says expect your work to speak for itself, we cannot rely on that. We have to talk up and speak about what it is that we do. So some ways to get out of that is just basically assessing who you are. Who am I? What are my core values? And so your core values are the guiding principles that dictate your behavior and help people understand the difference between right and wrong. Well, the same, you need those types of values when it comes to your profession as well and what you do. That your core values help to determine whether or not you're on the right path. So if you do a Google search for core values, you are going to get many, many, many lists of different words. Take the time to look at those lists, identify the values that are important to you, and see how they align with the work that you do and the direction that you're going in. So consider all of these things when you're communicating your core values. So some of my core values are authenticity, and that was evident in the slide where I introduced myself. I talked about an authentic motivator. So it's important. It's like innate in me that I am authentic, and I give off those types of vibes. So being authentic is important to me. That's one of my core values. Knowledge is important, and that is evident in the fact that I describe myself as a lifelong learner. So knowledge is important, is one of my core values as well. And all of those things align with what I do and what I want to do and how I describe my value. So the next question is, what themes are recurring throughout your career? This is story time for me now. When I was in high school, I took a graphic design course. And one of my projects for that class was to create 3 different templates for resumes. So that was my final project, was to create 3 different designed resume templates. When I was hired at the library in 2005, I was able to be able to use that knowledge of, resume creation to help people that came in the library to use our computer lab and to work on their resumes. So one of my initial concerns about people's resumes was how they looked, how they presented their resume. Over time, as I've always continuously worked in a computer lab in a library, I have always helped people with their resumes. And one of the things that became important to me was the content. I worked on the design, I got that kind of down pat. And then it was like, okay, well, let's talk about this content and what you're saying and how you're selling yourself and promoting your value. So that became a theme of my career. Even though I started out working with children, one of the things I always did was I always worked in a computer lab at some point and had to help people with resumes or career help. And then I started working with teens in 2010. And one of the things that when I started doing programs with teenagers, was I want to help them see how they can use the skills that they have or build skills or look at what, their next step or next level or next step is for, life. Like, what are they going to do when they graduate from high school? A lot of my focus around programming with them was to see what's next for them in their lives and how can I help prepare them for that next level. And a lot of that had to do with career development for them. And then in 2015, I moved into the Job Help Center. It was like kismet. It was one of those things that it was like a no-brainer for me to move into that area. And so I moved into the Job Help Center of the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library, where I was able to initiate and launch the first job fair that the library ever hosted. I was able to talk the powers that be into allowing me to go and get certified to be a career coach for the library. I was able to begin implementing new types of programming that really took the Job Help Center from primarily a computer lab to a center that actually worked with people surrounding their career development, professional development, and the things that would help move them to the next level. So those were the themes that kind of happened in every aspect of my career to get me here. So what themes are recurring throughout your career, throughout your time with the library? This helps you assess what you the things that you desire to help move you to the next level. So what's your unique selling proposition? Your story plus your skills plus your experience equals your unique selling proposition. So the story I just told about the theme that I have, the skills that I have been able to gain throughout the years, and then the experience. That experience is about how have I used all of those things to create a unique selling proposition. So it's about looking at achievements and awards and the things that make you most proud, which leads me into my next slide. Like, what am I proud of? Well, I'm proud of the transition that the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library's Job Help Center made as a result of the value that I added, the suggestions that I made, the things that I launched, the fact that I'm an executor, that I had an idea and I followed it through to execution. As a result of those things, being able to do or help the library transition their Job Help Center into that type of space, we've seen a lot more participants in our programming. We've hosted over 1,000 people attending our job fairs in the past, and we've connected with over 60 local employers to get people connected to jobs. That's what I'm most proud of. What are you most proud of? Then you have to look at what are my most important values, and this takes us back to the last slide and the talking about what our core values are. So what are those core values? What are those core values? Why are they important? How do they align with what I'm doing? Then you have to look at your strengths. What are my strengths? So a lot of people get hung up on what their strengths are. Like, they're like, I don't know. I don't really know what my strengths are. Well, it's important that you are able to assess your peers about what your strengths are. If there's anybody you've worked on a project with, ask them. Say, hey, I'm doing some self-assessment and I'm having a hard time with this, identifying what my strengths are. I know I do this well. I know I do this well. But maybe give them some options and say, well, what do you think about these as my strength? And they will be able to speak to whether you're on the right track or not. So maybe talk to your peers, ask others, what am I good at? What do you think I'm good at? What skills do people compliment you on or associate you with? And then think about, lastly, what do I want to accomplish? And thinking about what you want to accomplish is really the reasoning behind being here. Like, communicating your value is all about what's next. Like, what's next? What is the next step, and what do I want to accomplish in that next step? What value have I added in the past that I can bring to this future opportunity? So in the final part of assessing, we look at these common benchmarks to determine how we add value. So you add value by, I'm sorry, I'm getting hung up here. Determine if you have value to communicate. That's what that says. Um, you have something to say about your work area of expertise. I'm sure you do. If you've been working in an area or a space that for many, many years, there's something that you have to say about what you do. You've spent years studying and working within your area of expertise. I've spent 16 years doing this. And it is like secondhand to me, second nature to be able to talk about the value that I've added and how those things align with the value, my core values. Um, you feel that you feel like you know much more than others who are getting more recognition. This is an indicator that you need to get better at assessing or communicating your value. So you may be in a leadership position, and you are in a leadership position of any kind within your team or organization. That's how you know you need to be able to communicate your value. You have an advanced degree. I have 3 master's degrees, y'all. I should be able to speak to the value that has added to my life and how I've used my knowledge from that to add value to the roles and the projects that I've worked on. You've spoken on a panel regarding your expertise. I've been on a panel for NCLA where I talked about personal branding. So I'm regularly asked to talk about these things, come and do outreach at different locations about, you know, where my expertise is, which is specific to career development. Or you're a resource on your subject area. So whereas you may be in the background and people come and ask you these things about a specific thing or a specific area, if you are a resource to that, you can speak your value to that as well. So begin to assess yourself for what's next. So moving into the second part of this is identifying your contributions. So some ways to do that is going to be in our set. We've done a little bit of it in, in assessing, doing some self-assessment, but now is the time to get to work. List your accomplishments over your time and your role that aligns with your future endeavors. What accomplishments have you had? Are there any awards that you've received in your role or in past roles, in previous roles? Identify accomplishments that are outside of your day-to-day work. Sometimes we get so hung up on the things that we do for a living on our day-to-day job that it's hard to see how those accomplishments outside of work kind of align with what we do for work. Don't eliminate contributions from previous employers and how you've added value or made an impact in that role. Sometimes we have to kind of mix those experiences to get us a platform to communicate about. You want to regard your personality and how it helped you make contributions. So what are your superpowers? Again, on my introduction slide, I talked about, I gave a descriptor to the things that I've done to kind of help you identify the personality or regard my personality with these specific things. List any projects that you worked on and that you're proud of. List tasks that you do in your work that you enjoy. List what you learned about yourself in doing the work that you do. That's important to be able to learn to be able to identify what you've learned over time and how you've used that to add value. List any new skills, abilities, training, certificates, and degrees that you've acquired. And lastly, you want to consider self-statistics. And what is a self-statistic? That's when you're able to tell a story around what you've done using specific self-statistic words, which I like to call success verbs. So maybe you've achieved something or added, or maybe you were awarded, changed something, or contributed to something on the job. Did you decrease or deliver? Did you eliminate or exceed, expand, grow, generate, improve, increase, introduce, maximize, minimize, optimize, produce, reduce, or save? Did you use in any of your accomplishments or things that you've done on the job? Are you able to use those words? That's how you build stories around these around words that were success words. I can probably pull out about 5 words from that list that helps me tell a story that about what I've done on the job. And again, those are success verbs, and I love them. They are very helpful. So when I think about what I've done on the job and how I would say when I talk about launching the library's first job fair, I would talk about in addition to that, expanding how I was able to expand the library's programs and services to new communities, to new local employers, to other organizations, and partner with them. So I'm adding value by expanding those services and giving a story behind those services, programs and services. So after we begin to identify those contributions, there's this imposter that shows up. It really gets in the way of what happens next. And it's that imposter syndrome. We have to fight this imposter every time. You cannot talk about communicating your value, bragging on yourself without having the without having these thoughts that maybe, I'm not good enough, or maybe I can't do this. Who am I to speak about communicating value? And I talked to Amelia a little bit about this before we got started, and how my nerves were like before. And like anytime I've been doing presentations like this for many years, and I always get in my nerves before every presentation. And it's really imposter syndrome. No matter how much or how often I do this, it always tries to get in the way. But the important thing is confidence is key. So we have to be able to identify what it is that's keeping us in this space, or tries to, take away the confidence that we have around communicating our value. And it's called imposter syndrome. And it refers to an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. And some characteristics of imposter syndrome are these things: self-doubt, and an inability to realistically assess your competence and skills. And so listen, when we go back and we look to self-assess and identify the contributions that we've made in places, this is where people get hung up. They are unable to identify those things that are going to help them communicate their value. And that's all a part of imposter syndrome. Don't let that get in the way of you being able to communicate your value. Another characteristic is attributing your success to external factors, comparing yourself to others. That's a no-no. Berating your performance, fear that you won't live up to expectations. Overachieving is a part of imposter syndrome. Sabotaging your own success, and then setting very challenging goals and feeling disappointed when you fall short. How do we cope with this imposter syndrome when it's trying to take down everything we've worked for? Don't let it take down everything you work for. Remember, to cope with imposter syndrome, you have to be able to share those feelings. Sit down, talk to somebody about it. And my way of coping prior to getting started with this presentation was to tell Amelia, my nerves are really rattled right now. I shared my feelings with her. And as soon as that happened, I started to come down. So assess your abilities. This goes back to identifying your contributions, writing out those accomplishments that you've had and the impact that you've made and in your roles. It's gonna be important to coping and overcoming your imposter syndrome. Once you write it down, and it's a fact, it's fact-based. Once you go back and write that down, this is what I did. Can other people determine that you've done that as well? Your peers can speak to this. Remember, you are not a fraud. You've done this, and it's right there on paper. People have seen you do it. So assess your abilities, write down your accomplishments, what you're good at, and continue to do that self-assessment to remind yourself that you are worthy and you have done these things. Question your thoughts. What is the evidence that you haven't done these things? There's no evidence. You have accomplished these things, and you have peers and colleagues that can speak to that. Stop comparing yourself. Don't compare yourself to others. And stop fighting your feelings. Don't fight the feeling. Talk to somebody about it. These are the best ways to cope with that. So with all of that said, we're going to talk about bragging on yourself. So in bragging on yourself, we're going to identify the who, what, when, where, why, and how of bragging on yourself. And so first we'll look at what value are you communicating? Identifying and focusing in on that thing that you want to communicate to someone. Identify what you want to communicate. Be intentional. Find a focus. We may have been able to add value in many different places in your organization or many different types of projects. But in identifying and being intentional and focusing what you are communicating, is all about considering who your audience is. Who are you speaking to? And what is it that you need to get out of this? What is the opportunity that has been presented, and how are you going to present that? What are you identifying to communicate in this specific opportunity? You want to be clear about what you're communicating, and that's all about focus. You want to be, in communicating what you're communicating, you want to be a good listener. And that's important, because what you'll hear in communication is what they need. How are you going to communicate? How are you going to counter by communicating what they're speaking to? And then you want to know your audience. So you want to read the room, okay? Every opportunity is not an opportunity to communicate your value. So definitely read the room. You never know what's happening, what people are going through, what their day is looking like. So maybe it may be as simple as, scheduling a meeting with someone that you need to share your value. If sometimes you don't have that opportunity and you have to take it in that moment, but definitely make sure you're reading the room and master the art of timing when it comes to communicating your value. Who is your audience? Who's my audience? So there are 3 different types of audiences. The first audience is your middle ground audience. So these are people who are open and responsive. They're usually easily persuaded or controlled. So who are you speaking to? Are you talking to a peer or a colleague? Are you talking to a supervisor or a director? Who's going to fall in that middle ground audience? Who's open and responsive to what you have to say? Then you have your distant audience. Your distant audience is usually not interested at all. They don't really care what you have to say, but you need them in an effort to move to that next level or to get what you need. So they're usually not interested. They're apathetic, and it usually takes some convincing to get them to reply to what you need from them. Then you have your supportive audience. And they are usually very engaged, and it doesn't take a lot of targeting. You don't have to target this audience strongly. And I would venture to say that these are usually your friends, the supportive audience, or a supervisor that is helpful, that someone that wants to see you grow in your position. They may be a part of your supportive audience. So it's important that you are able to communicate to each one of these audiences, and your communication about who you are and the value that you add may look different for every audience. And in doing so, it may be a little challenging, especially for that distant audience. So be prepared to speak to each one of these audiences in different manners at different times. Why do I need to communicate my value? And we talked about this in the beginning. Your work does not speak for itself. Well, it may. Let me take that back. Your work may speak for itself. But it's going to take a little bit more than just someone looking and saying, oh, Latrice did that. You may have to speak to that. You may have to communicate the value that you added. What were your contributions to a specific project, or to an organization, or to an assignment that you had? Because your resume and your online profiles will not speak for you. They will not be the only thing speaking for you. You will have to speak directly to someone at some point about the value that you've added. You can convey the enthusiasm and excitement around what it is that you're trying to, the story that you're trying to tell, straight from your mouth. So at that time, you have to be able to tell your career story. No one else can speak to your career story and the value you add. That is why you need to communicate your value. And then just the opinion of others is the icing on the cake. So in addition to you being able to communicate your value, and then others being able to speak to that, is definitely the icing on the cake. So consider that in your why you need to do that. So how do I communicate my value? And this is when people begin to think to themselves, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. You have to share your value through an elevator speech. If you haven't heard of an elevator speech, it's a short, persuasive speech you use to introduce yourself or your idea. Purpose is to explain yourself or the value that you add quickly and clearly, to spark interest in who you are and what you do. Now, an elevator speech stems from a story about being in an elevator with a CEO of a company, and you have an idea, and it's going to take you want to be able to introduce yourself or spark interest from the ground floor to the top floor, which usually takes between 30 and 60 seconds. In my opinion, the elevator speech is what sparks the conversation, starts the conversation, and it's up to you in communicating your value to keep it going. You want to be able to say things that spark the interest of the party that you're speaking to, that would give them the space to be able to ask follow-up questions to a point where they want to talk a little more about the value that you've added. So that is how you're going to communicate your value. The elevator speech is just the starting point. You have to get your conversation in check. And that just means you have to have all of those things that we talked about in identifying your contributions, have those things set in stone and ready to talk about, have stories surrounding them. How did you use your self-statistics, using those success words to tell the story around what you want to talk about with that person? So again, how to write your elevator pitch. We won't do this here today, but if you want to begin working on this, you want to start with who you are and share what you really want to do. And so we've already gotten the ball rolling, because in our self-assessment, in our identifying our contributions, we should have been doing this part of writing our elevator speech. Start with who you are and share what you really want to do. Then you want to talk about what you do. And sometimes this does not take on the role of what I do in my day-to-day job, but what is it that you do? How do you add value? Like, and one of the initial discussion questions, I saw a lot of people talk about, being meticulous, and that type of thing. So what are you meticulous about? How do you use that in projects, in roles? How have you used that to communicate your value? How do you do it? How do you do what you do? And then lastly, explain the results of your work and what impact you made. So this is the time. I saw somebody say in the chat earlier about, I don't know how to quantify the things that I'm saying, or the value that I communicate. So it's important that you take the time to, again, identify those contributions you've made and be able to quantify it. So I talked about earlier the job fair that I was able to introduce and launch for the library. I talked about how I packed over 1,000 people over the course of maybe 6 job fairs that we've had. So you have to look at all of those things, like what numbers can I involve? And sometimes quantifying leads to quantifying leads to qualifying. So what qualifies you for this? It's very important not to get hung up on the numbers, because it's all about impact. What impact did you make beyond the numbers? Were you able to get someone connected to a job? And that's what I was able to do. I was able to get many people connected to jobs, but were they successful in those roles? So what was the next step after you were able to explain the results of what you did, whatever your outcomes were? So in reviewing, we've covered the self-assessment. Who am I? What do I do? And we've identified our contributions by identifying what have I done and what value I've added. And lastly, bragging on ourselves by starting to communicate our value through through writing an elevator speech, which is going to start the conversation. And it's up to you to know your story, your career story, and what you've done to continue that conversation. And so, does anyone have any questions for me or feedback? And you can say, I think you can unmute and say, anything, give me your feedback, or you can put it in the chat. And if you have feedback for me, and you don't want to share it here, my email address is right under the word feedback, Patrice J. Fox, dfox@cmlibrary.org. And I hope that this presentation was of value to you, that you could take what you learned and use it. And here are the resources that I used here. And thank you so much for engaging with me in the beginning and for listening to this presentation. And I hope that you all have a great day. Thank you. Yes, tying your elevator speech to a mission or strategic plan is definitely the way to go. If you find it difficult, again, it's all about alignment. It's all about alignment. How are you going to align those things? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tatrice.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day and a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you.